Yo, what is going on, guys? It is Boy Nick here, back again with a brand new video today. This video is the second series in my review, which I review every single Marvel Cinematic Universe Disney Plus TV show, as well as special up to the release of Secret Invasion. Today we're going to be reviewing Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is the second show in Phase 4. So right off the bat, I think Anthony Mackie is the best he's ever been as Falcon. I've always liked him as this character, especially in, Winter Soldier and Civil War and Infinity War. He does a really good job as the character, but this time they actually give him a lot more to do, as he's basically like the front runner for the show. I mean, it's always kind of been cool to see him as like the supporting character in the past, but the fact that he actually has like a lot more to do this time is really awesome. And there's a lot of really cool things about Falcon that I think Anthony Mackie plays him really, really well. They do some really awesome stuff with him, and it kind of just goes to show you that like the way they cast him in the earlier movies really did pay off for what they end up doing here down the road. He's really great in this show, and I'm glad that Falcon finally got the platform he deserved. Of course, Sebastian Stan is also fantastic as Bucky or the Winter Soldier. He's given a lot more to do as Bucky. I mean, we've known a lot more about Bucky with these movies than we do about Falcon, so he doesn't become the front runner as much as Falcon, but he's still very much the half of that coin there in the show. But they still like give him an interesting arc following all the stuff that he's gone through within the previous movies, and I think that the story for his character is very intriguing. I like what they do with him. I like the fact that Bucky is still dealing with the stuff that happened beforehand. I think Sebastian does the dramatic acting of this character really well. I think that him and Anthony Mackie are a fantastic duo for this show, just like how I really loved Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany in WandaVision. I love these two as a duo in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They both do an excellent job with their characters. Their characters are given great story, and I think the two of them make a really awesome duo. This next one's going to be controversial, but Wyatt Russell gives a great performance as John Walker. Now, I know I'm probably going to get some mixed comments about Wyatt Russell if anyone decides to even comment on this video, but because I remember when Wyatt Russell first came out as Captain America, a lot of people thought that he was too nerdy looking or he looked too weird to be Captain America. I mean, that's not really my concern. I'm not concerned with the looks of the character. I'm concerned with the character itself. And yeah, John Walker is somewhat of a problematic character. Not so much in terms of the writing, but just in terms of his moral compass. Yeah, John Walker is not necessarily a good dude, but for me, it doesn't change the fact that Wyatt Russell plays John Walker very well. And they actually kind of do some interesting stuff with him that, as from a writing standpoint, I really like. And I can't wait to see what they end up doing with John Walker later down the road of the MCU. So yeah, I can see why some people maybe wouldn't like the character that much, but I don't think that's to discredit Wyatt Russell in any way. I thought Wyatt Russell did a great job in this show. Erin Kellyman is also really good as Carly. Her character's kind of interesting because she's, of all the villains in the show, she's like the main villain because she's kind of like the leader of this thing. And her character's kind of interesting because we've never really seen a character a whole lot like Carly in this one, and her motives are interesting, but also because she's very young, and, it's like, they think about how destructive teenagers are, but they actually get some really interesting, like, dramatic moments out of it, and they make some really excellent points, actually, about her character. And I think Erin Kellyman actually does a really good job at playing her. I'm not sure if they're going to end up doing a whole lot with this character down the road. I assume probably not. And there's kind of some more character things I would have liked to have seen with Carly, but for the most part, I thought they did Carly very well, and I thought Erin Kellyman gave a really good performance. It was really interesting to see them bring back Daniel Bruhl as Zemo, because Zemo's the main villain in Captain America Civil War, and he comes back in this one. He's still technically a bad guy, but he's kind of working with them now, and it's kind of just an interesting dynamic of, like, he's not entirely evil, as we saw him in the previous movie. He's kind of just, he's interesting. That's all I'll say. I don't want to go too much into spoilers because this is intended to be a spoiler-free review, but I don't know. The stuff they do with Zemo is kind of interesting, and it doesn't really pay off a whole lot in my opinion. Like, they don't really do a whole lot with him. The scenes in which he is there, I was fascinated by, and it makes me wonder if they're going to do anything with Zemo in the future. I'm down to see what that could be, though, because Daniel Bruhl is really good as the character. And, of course, it was also really great to see Emily Van Camp again as Sharon Carter. I was glad that they included her in the show because I always liked Sharon Carter in The Winter Soldier and in Civil War, but I always kind of felt like they could have always given her at least a little bit more to do. And it's not to say that she's necessarily a front runner in this show, because she is still kind of a supporting character, but she's the front runner beside just a few characters, and so they actually give her some interesting stuff to do. And as someone who loves the Captain America storyline, as someone who likes the Agent Carter TV show, starring Peggy Carter, of course, to see the daughter or granddaughter, I can't remember exactly, of Peggy Carter be as interesting as she is, for me as a fan, is really cool. And I think Emily Van Camp does a great job, and I can't wait to see what they do with her in Thunderbolts, which I believe is the next show coming after this. One of the really underrated performances in the show that I just had to give credit to was Carl Lumbly as Isaiah Bradley. He was fantastic. He gives arguably the best performance in this show. I think he really did a fantastic job. He really captured that like struggle emotion of his character so well. And I'm not going to go into too much about what they do with the character. If you've seen the show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Carl Lumbly, that guy gave an excellent performance as Isaiah Bradley. I really liked what they do with the character, and I love the performance from Lumbly. They really did get the best actor for the job with that character. The Flag Smashers also make for intriguing villains, because we've kind of seen this archetype with villains before where they kind of like decide to ruin the world because the world is they're fed up with the world and they decide to ruin the world back, but from their point of view they're kind of doing the good thing. And like we've seen this happen over and over again, but for me it's kind of interesting to see that it's a team of people doing it this time as opposed to just like one person doing it. And I kind of would have liked to have seen the Flag Smashers just a little bit more, but I think they're really interesting villains, and it's kind of just, it's an interesting idea to go on with this show. I've always really loved the whole idea of like a political drama behind these Captain America kind of characters. That I've always really loved about those Captain America movies, the fact that there's kind of like a political thing going on, or like a crisis with the world in terms of just like social issues going on, and then you have like the villains struggling kind of with the same thing, and they all kind of overlap with each other over their struggle. It's just that they go about it in very different ways, and as a Captain America fan, I really love that they did that with this show. The show also has excellent action sequences. I mean, it's really well choreographed. It's really on par with the stuff that you see in The Winter Soldier and Civil War. It very much has that vibe of The Winter Soldier and Civil War. I'm not sure if the Russos did a whole lot with the direction of the show, if they just had someone whose directing style is very similar to the Russos, but it feels very much like it takes place within that storyline. And I don't know, it's very well directed, but I love the action sequences. Like, it's really well choreographed. You get some really interesting camera work, some shaky cam, and like a whole bunch of pan-by shots with insane choreography. And I don't know, it's really entertaining for me to see. And as someone who loved The Winter Soldier and Civil War, I really liked seeing a whole 6-episode series with that kind of action in it. I also wrote down that I really like the fact that this show explores deeper things regarding the power that human has, because we kind of see, especially during the ending of the show, how even though the Flag Smashers are doing a whole bunch of bad things, and they are, even those of us who are not like the Flag Smashers, we have the same power as them, you know? And so it's just really interesting for them to talk about the whole thing about how we criticize others for abusing power, however, we abuse power ourselves if we had the opportunity to, or we can do it in our own separate way. I actually like the fact that this show does a whole thing about, like, we all think that the other person is crazy, but we're all equally just as likely to do that thing as the next person, so, you know, like, be careful who you decide to criticize, or be careful how you criticize other people, because you could do the same thing. And I think that's a really interesting and also important message to put in with the show, especially with the crazy way the world is right now. I mean, I think it's really important for a show like this to address themes about how we all seem to think that we're all very different from each other, when in actuality we're really similar, and we just don't see that common similarities with each other. I think the message of that is really well done. I also wrote down that I like the message for the deeper themes of struggles for the black community in America. I'm not going to go too much into it if you haven't seen the show, but they kind of go a little bit into struggles that black men have in America. And the thing that I like about the way they do it is I like how the fact that they make it personal to the characters, because I feel like if you make it personal to the characters, it makes the message that much more impactful. And I think it is very impactful in the show. You really do care about the characters in this show, and they go about it in a way that makes you really care for the characters, and where you understand where they're coming from without feeling like it's necessarily a PSA or something. I think that it's really well done. I think it's due to the really well-written writing and the great acting from people like Anthony Mackie and Carl Lumbly and other actors in the show that I haven't even mentioned. I think they do a really good job at getting this message across. And as I've kind of gone into, I like the fact that the characters for the show are complex. I feel like they're complex for the better. I don't like movies or shows wherever the characters are super black and white. I like the fact that in this show they actually explain how there's layers to everything. We don't live in a black and white world. We live in a world vast with color, where like everything is just so confusing and convoluted that we oftentimes think to each other that it's so simple, and it's not. I think that the show actually does a good job of doing that with the motivations as well as the characters, and they just do a really good job of showing that, like, not necessarily everybody in the movie is completely good, but also not everybody in the show is necessarily completely bad. It's a really that's a good theme to have in a superhero movie, in my opinion. I think that they do a good job of doing it. I know I keep saying movie, I mean show. My bad. Last things I want to talk about is that this show has really interesting setup for future projects. There is kind of one thing that we saw within the post-credit scene of Black Widow, which I won't go into if you haven't seen, which is kind of a small thing. But I know that the next chapter for these characters, I believe, is supposed to be Thunderbolts. I'm not entirely sure what Thunderbolts is supposed to be, but I'm looking forward to it, because this is a really great way to set up these characters for the future trajectory of the MCU, and I can't wait to see what they end up doing in Thunderbolts. So it's great setup for that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I wrote is that this show does have pretty satisfying endings for the characters. I do have some issues with the pacing of the show, which I'll get to in the flaws, but the actual satisfying arc for these characters I thought was really, really well done. And the show ended and I was very happy the way they ended the arcs of the characters, especially for Falcon. Falcon's arc was definitely my favorite thing about the show. It's kind of interesting how we just assume it's going to be so easy when we see how his arc starts off in Endgame, or how his arc is at the end of Endgame. And we think that's going to be so simple, but they actually kind of make the show to show, no, it's not that simple. It's actually a lot harder than what you might think. And I like the fact that they actually did that, because this show could have felt like filler, but it doesn't feel like filler to me. It feels like they actually cared about making a complex story with the character of Falcon and Bucky, of course, but I kind of felt like Falcon was like the height of this show, really, in my opinion. I think they do that kind of story arc for him very well. So Falcon definitely had a very satisfying character arc, but I thought the other characters did too. I thought they gave a satisfying character arc to the Flag Smashers and to Sharon and also to Bucky, but we definitely have some more places to go, and I can't wait to see what they do with that. So I do have some flaws with the show, even though I do really like Falcon and the Winter Soldier. My first flaw is that the show fun is something like WandaVision, which is kind of dumb to compare two shows that are not similar at all. I know it's a dumb thing, but it's kind of the thing where it's like it's the thing where WandaVision was like the first Disney Plus MCU show, and it was really fun and stuff, and it was like a nice way to kind of just get sucked into the future of the MCU. And this show is different tonally, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but whenever you watch a show like WandaVision and then watch a show like this, it's noticeably not as fun. And that's not a bad thing or anything. It's still a very well done show, but it's just that thing where you kind of wish it was slightly more fun because you had so much fun with the previous show, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's a great drama, but it feels like maybe it could have been slightly more fun. I also wrote down that the pacing can feel inconsistent. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but we deal with a lot of very complex layers in the show that I really do appreciate, like I've mentioned, but sometimes we kind of go between this thing, we go between that thing, and just at times, I don't know, like, it can feel very fast-paced, like there's really amazing, mind-blowing action sequence, and then we have a long, dramatic thing that just brings down the pacing or whatever. So the pacing between all the different conflicts and scenes and action sequences and all that can feel inconsistent at times. It can feel slightly incohesive, but it's still a great show nonetheless. It's just, I wish it was structured just a little bit more cohesively. And the last thing I've written down is that the build-up during the episodes are great, but the conclusion happens very quickly. And I wrote down that it feels like an extra episode or so would have been nice. This didn't have to be like a whole 20-episode series. It could have maybe been like 7 episodes or 8 episodes, because the 6 episodes were really good, but it's just a thing where it's like the first 5 episodes do a really good job at setting up things that could happen, and episode 6 gives very satisfying conclusions, but it also just happens so fast that it feels like the conclusion and the setup don't have enough time to just breathe into each other, if you know what I mean, or the setup doesn't have enough time to breathe into the conclusion, I feel like. So I don't have any issues with the way they concluded the show. I kind of just wish that it would have allowed it more time to feel more impactful, but it still is a very impactful conclusion. I do like the way the show ended. And so I do have some flaws with Falcon and Winter Soldier, but overall I do really like this show. As a Captain America fan, there's so many things about it that I like. As a Marvel fan, there's so many things about it that I like. I will say, though, of the main things that we've seen for Captain America with the first Avenger, Winter Soldier, Civil War, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, this one would be my least favorite of the bunch, but it's still quite good. I still quite like it a lot, and I would still definitely recommend it to those of you who have not seen it. I know some of you haven't. So for that reason, I'm going to give Falcon and the Winter Soldier an overall rating of an 8.5 out of 10. It could have been slightly more entertaining, but I still think for what it is a very entertaining show, and I'm going to give it an A-. So that was my review for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Next week, I'll have my review for Loki, which I'm really excited to review that show. I'm reviewing each of these Disney Plus series and specials weekly, so be on the lookout for that. And also tomorrow on Saturday, I will be having my review for Spider-Man 3, because I'm doing my review I'm doing my series where I review every single Sony Spider-Man Universe film, so be on the lookout for that. And I should also have a review for The Amazing Spider-Man coming out next week, so be on the lookout for all that stuff. Also, make sure that you go click my link in the bio to go follow me on all my socials on Twitch, Instagram, and TikTok. Really helps out a lot if you guys would go follow those and see what I'm doing over there. That's going to be it for the video, so guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified about my latest videos. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you think. And yeah, it's been it. Peace.